Right, okay, so it is 5 o'clock now, so we'll make an official start to the meeting. So welcome everybody to today's joint overview and scrutiny and audit meeting. Just to go through some of the general sort of guidelines, just to remind everybody that everybody needs to be muted unless you're the one speaking. If you do have a question, please raise your virtual hand on the screen and I'll invite you to speak. We need to make sure that the chair invites you in first and one person speaks at a time. If you have a comment to make, you should only raise the symbol of the hand when the chair asks for comments. If for any reason a member has cause to leave the meeting, then we must indicate this to the chair before leaving, or raise your hand or send a message in the online chat. Okay, so just to remind everybody that today's meeting will be recorded. This recording may be broadcast on the authority's internet. All attendees will be in view of the camera, and by attending you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings being used as outlined above. Okay. And if we go into agenda item number 1, apologies for absence.
I've not received any, Chair, but Councillor Carter has apologised that he'll be 15 minutes late.
Lovely, thank you, Mayor. And Councillor Jones, is that what you were going to say about Councillor Carter?
No, John McCarthy, Co-opty John McCarthy gives his apologies.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I don't think there's any other apologies. So moving on, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? Members are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal prejudicial interest. No? Okay. So moving on to agenda item number 3. This is to discuss the proposed revenue budget. Summary of report can be found from 1.1 through to 1.6, and with recommendations found at 2.1, namely for the content of the report to be discussed and noted by this committee. If I could call on Steve as previously agreed. Steve will provide an overview and an introduction of the report. We will then go to general questions before taking questions for each appendix item. So we're not sort of jumping from one to the other, just to keep the meeting more structured. So with that in mind, I will hand over to Steve.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So what we've basically got here is the revenue budget for next year, and it actually builds on the council workshop that we had last week. So under paragraph 3, it's got the actual settlement for next financial year, and it's evident there that we've received a settlement of plus 4.64%, and that is compared to the Welsh average of 3.84%, so we're better than the Welsh average there. And we have the third best settlement in Wales for next financial year. What I will, if I could take you to the last but one bullet point under 3.1, because this is very important in that it's been basically stated that there will still be support for authorities from the hardship fund next year because of the impact of the pandemic, and that would be considered as a separate issue and will not form part of the settlement. So the actual settlement itself and the comparator across all of Wales is shown in Appendix 1 of the report, and changes to the key data sets are included as Appendix 2. So Section 4 then takes us back to where we were when the medium-term financial plan was set this time last year, and we were showing a budget gap of nearly £3.6 million for 2021-22, and that was based on the assumptions under 4.2. Where we are now is shown under paragraph 5, and it should be noted as well that in this report we are focusing on the budget for next year only. We're not looking at this stage at the MTFP, and that will be considered over the next few weeks, and that will be brought back to the Council on the 3rd of March. So indicated in table 1 of the report is how we've moved from the opening budget gap of nearly 3.6 million to where we are now, and we have a budget surplus of £394,000. So if I just focus on a couple of those items within table 1, under the revenue settlement, if you compare the settlement received, the 4.64, to what we budgeted for, plus 2%, we have then received additional funding of nearly £2.8 million. And the calculations are itemised in Appendix 3 of this report. Another factor to look at and focus on is the award for pay for next financial year. We've kept it at this stage at the budgeted plus 2%, although the Chancellor in his comments of last November has basically stated that he would like to see a pay freeze within local government for next year. But at the moment, until that is settled, and we might not get that indication until August, September, we've decided to keep it at 2% for now, and I think that's the best thing to do at this stage. Then if we go on to the additional demands, and it's evident from the table that we have further demands of £4.9 million, which are £1.9 million over what we'd indicatively budgeted for next financial year. We are expecting that nearly £1.3 million will be funded through the COVID-19 Hardship Fund, which will be continued into next financial year. And the additional demand schedule is shown in Appendix 4 of this report. The capacity exercise is £705,000 has been identified as the investment required as part of the capacity exercise, and that is to establish where we've got areas within our services which are at risk because of the numbers of staff we currently have. So we've carried out that capacity exercise, and we are requiring investment of £705,000 for next year, and that is itemised in Appendix 5 of this report. Another major one I want to focus on then in the table are the service efficiencies, and £1.041 million has been identified by your service managers, and those are itemised in Appendix 6. It should be noted that the council tax increase has been factored in as at 4.99%, which is the same council tax increase as was approved for this financial year. But at this stage, we haven't made, or Cabinet, neither Cabinet or Council have made the decision yet on what the council tax increase will be for next year, but that will be resolved now over the next couple of weeks. So where we want to be is in paragraph 6. We have to set a balanced revenue budget for 21-22, and that includes our council tax increase by the length of March. and hence we'll have a special council on the 3rd of March. I should note as well that the final settlement will not be announced until the 2nd of March, but we're not expecting any changes and just in that final settlement. So what we do next is in paragraph 7. It's as I've stated, we've got the final council on the 3rd of March, and that will then be the final budget report for next year, and that will then consider the revenue budget, the council tax increase, and by that stage as well, it'll look at our medium-term plans in going forward. So if I stop there, Chair, and that is a summary of the actual report, and I'll pause there for questions.
Okay, so as mentioned earlier, we'll just have, I think at the moment, we might just have Councillor Jones with a general question. So these questions now are aimed at more of an overview of the entire report rather than specific appendices. So Clive, if we could go to you, and then we'll, if nobody, and I think there's another person as well with a question, and then we'll go into the appendices. So over to you, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions in relation to paragraph 5.19 on page 8 under the heading Potential Further Commitments. And there are 3 dots there, the first of which refers to the school's budget increase resulting from updated information in respect of free school meals entitlement. Could Steve or perhaps Sue Walker tell me when will this updated information in respect of free school meals be available? Have you any idea what the likely cost is going to be? And will councillors be advised of the budget before the budget meeting in early March? Thank you.
Okay, if I can respond there firstly, is that we are expecting that figure to be known within the next couple of weeks, and we will be expecting then that will be known before the council of the 3rd of March, obviously, and it's certainly the case then that I can make that figure known to the council. I haven't got that figure at this point in time because the calculations are still being compiled. But from what I can gather, it's not going to be a huge amount, so that should be something we just will be able to accommodate with just comfort.
Okay, thank you for that. And the second one is the dot down from that one, council tax bad debt provision increase in the council tax collection during the pandemic has reduced by circa 2%. As you know, Steve, I've been asking who put this figure over the last few months. I understand the figure, the last figure was £600,000 outstanding in council tax collection for this current tax year, and you advise that there are some cases which have been submitted to be dealt with in the court next month. Is that figure still 600,000, or has that come down again?
As it currently stands, we have got an estimate at the present time. If you compare our collection rate as it currently stands to this time last year, then we are down by about 2.1%. So, but we have had some positive news as well over the last couple of days, in that the Welsh Government have confirmed that there will be some support for that council tax and for that lack of collection of council tax. So we are awaiting some figures to come through now over the next couple of weeks, but there will be some support for just no authorities and to assist us with this figure.
Thank you. It's good to hear we have some good news, but they've given it no indication how much support they're going to give then, Steve.
Not at this stage, no. We're still awaiting the global figure for Wales, and then we'll have to wait then and to understand exactly what our allocation will be from that Wales figure. But again, there just was a discussion towards the latter end of last week with just some of the Welsh Government officials, and we are expecting something, I would imagine, within the next couple of weeks.
And again, before the budget meeting, special budget meeting early March, you'll know what that is, Steve.
Yes, indeed. Hopefully, Clive, yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. So we've got questions from Councillor Gibbs. If we go to Councillor Gibbs next, and then there's a question from Jeff Beard as well. So Councillor Gibbs, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. A quick question, Steve, on the pay award. Obviously, you've kept the increase at 2% at this stage. If it does come out as a pay freeze across the board, how much savings does that 2% equate to for the end of the year?
Yes, if you look at the savings, because if it is going to be a pay freeze, then what the actual Chancellor has noted is that for those salaries under £24,000, they will receive a one-off £250. So if you factor that in as well, the figure comes to around £440,000.
Okay, lovely. That's all I wanted to get a rough idea of where we potentially could be on this. So thank you, Steve.
Okay, so Jeff Beard.
Thank you, Chair. Steve, on point 3.1, it's to do with the Teachers' Pay Award. Can you tell me, previously that's always been ring-fenced, but it says it's being transferred into the settlement. Have I just read it wrong, or is it still ring-fenced? Yes,
that is still actually ring-fenced. What we've basically got there is that the Welsh Government have reflected within our base for next year that element of the pay award for and for this financial year. So that's just to reflect that element from September onwards for this year. So that's added to the base for next year, and that's then what the overall increase in our funding is actually based upon. So it's got nothing at all to do with the just award for next financial year. It's just making sure that our basing going forward reflects that amount, and that will be, or that has been included within our school formulas for next financial year as well.
Thank you for that, Chair, and thank you for that, Steve. That's my only question.
Okay, so any general comments before we move on to page 11? No? Okay. Steve, did you want to is there anything you wanted to say on Appendix 1, page 11, before we go to questions?
No, Chair, it's basically, it's the overall settlements for the whole of Wales, looking at the Wales average, and it just indicates that we have the third best settlement in Wales at 4.64%.
Okay, so if we go straight into questions, this is specifically now, if I can take the committee's attention to page 11, this is specifically on Appendix 1 as requested by Councillor Jones. Any questions on Appendix 1? No? Any comments on question 1, Appendix 1 even? Okay, so moving on, we'll do Appendix 2. Any questions on Appendix 2? No. Comments, Appendix 2, page 12. Okay, I'm not seeing anything. Please let me know if I've missed anyone. So moving on to page 13, which is Appendix 3. Questions on Appendix 3? Come on, Councillor Jones, you want to do this one? You haven't got any questions. Okay, so no questions on Appendix 3. Any comments on Appendix 3? No? Okay, moving on. Appendix 4, page 14, questions. There we go. Councillor Jones. Clive Jones, even.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I've got, and I'm sure other members have got questions on other aspects of Appendix 4. My first one is on page 15, and it's reference 5, learning. In the individual school's budget, refers to seeding a Welsh medium nursery as approved with the council report on the 29th of January 2020. Could someone explain to me, because we're talking about, I think, 320,000 quid, £60,000 next year, exactly what that amount of money will be spent on, and can they exactly explain what seeding is, please?
Jones, it's seeding a Welsh medium, a new school. Is actually starting a school without actually appointing a new head teacher. So what we're looking to do is grow a school from nursery upwards. So it's a seedling school. It'll be linked to Ysgol Santes Tydfil, but until the school becomes established, and there are significant numbers of children, so probably up until Key Stage 2, we will keep it as a satellite of Santes Tydfil. So that's the terminology of a seeding school. The reason that we need the funding is to actually support the staffing and to support infrastructure. So that's again why the figures will increase, because as there are more children, we need more funding and there'll be more infrastructure. As the school moves forward, we have secured money from Welsh Government to refurbish one of the school buildings that will be released from the 3 to 16, and that will become the new school moving forward. So we've got capital money, but what we haven't got is revenue money for the staffing and for things like that. So that's why that's there.
Just to clarify again, thank you for that, Sue. Will it be based initially in Ysgol Santes Tydfil?
No, it'll be based initially in the Gurnos Nursery School. So the Gurnos Nursery children are moving up onto the Goitra site, and then we'll look at because it's a reasonably large building, and we'll be able to have reception and possibly into year 1 into that school as well, by which time we'll be able to move on to the new site.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is that all, Clive?
No, but I got questions. On
the other appendices. Okay,
well, on Appendix 4, but a bit further down.
Okay, if you do that one now, then Clive, we'll stick with you on Appendix 4, and then we'll go to Councillor Chaplin.
Right. My next question is page 18, and it's social services. And it's at the top of the page, in relation to independent residential establishments. It refers there, amongst other things, the original MTFP assumptions need to be adjusted to allow for actual services being commissioned and adjust for contract prices since the last review. And it refers to there'll be 185 long-term placements within the MTFP assumptions. There is no figure, any money's allocated for the next financial year. So could that be clarified as to why there's no monies there? Then for the following 2 years, figures have been put in amounted to 954,000. So could that be explained again for 2022-3 and 23-24? Is that for increased prices and further long-term placements?
Hi, Councillor Jones. Right, I'll do my best to answer this. So for next year, obviously COVID's had a major impact on our budget for this year in residential. So we are seeing an underspend in that budget. So there are a number of vacancies within our care homes. So therefore, the projection for next year is not feeling that we'll need the growth, because it's going to take some time to rebuild some of those placements back up. So the budget is sufficient for next year, and we may, if the situation continues, underspend on that budget line. Although I think it's difficult to say at this time what's going to happen, because obviously if everybody was discharged from hospital as the plan would be, then in theory, you know, that budget position will change. The growth for 22-23 and 23-24 was based on sort of our current figures and projections moving forward. So the population, what packages of care we're putting in place, and for those who are likely to need residential care moving forward. So with the costs of the various placements, we're seeing a huge increase in nursing care and dementia care, and they are more high cost placements. So moving forward, the costs of those will increase. So they were sort of our projections moving forward.
Thank you. Chair, could I suggest that, to avoid me and other members going back and forth the pages, if perhaps we can do it page by page on all of this?
I think whichever way we do it, Clive, we are still going to be switching back and forth. I think it's impossible to completely avoid switching back and forth. We're either switching back and forth portfolios, or we're switching back and forth pages. So I think if we could just stick with it this way, if you finish your questions on Appendix 4, and then we'll go to the next person, they can do theirs on Appendix 4, and we'll stick to it that way.
Right. No, I've got no other questions. I don't think I'm looking. Yes. Yes, I have. This is on page 26, and it's 51 in relation to neighbourhood services. And elected members will remember we agreed to a business case for the Gully Sucker service to come back in-house last November. There's a figure in there of 149,000. And during discussion of that business case in two different councils, there was a reference to the waste that the Gully Sucker actually sucks up on its journey. Currently, we have a service contract with Caerphilly, and any waste then is deposited in somewhere in Gethley. When we used to have this service, and we'd have a place in RCT to deposit this. My understanding was that there was a difference in price where this was deposited in RCT and the one in Gethley and Caerphilly. Has that been further investigated? Because I understand this service is likely to start with us in April this year. So if it's been deposited in Gethley, for example, will that 149,000 figure be reduced, or is it included in the 149,000? Thank you.
Okay, who's taking
Yes,
that?
Clive, the intention is that the waste will be disposed of in Caerphilly, and it's my understanding that that figure includes the cost of disposal of that waste.
Clive?
Yep, thank you.
Clive, is that all?
I think so. If I've missed anything, I'll come back to you.
Okay, lovely. So moving on, we've got questions from Councillor Chaplin, Councillor Richards, Councillor Gibbs and Councillor Smith. If we could start with Councillor Chaplin, specifically on Appendices 4, please.
Right, okay. Thank you, Chair. Mine's on page 14, item 3, learning, individual school budgets. In a report that went to Cabinet on January the 6th, 11 of the schools in the borough are facing budget deficits. Will this have an impact on the schools' budgets moving forward?
Sue, did you want to take that one?
I'm going to ask Steve to take that one, I think, please.
Okay.
Yes, if I take that one, yes, thank you, Chair. What will be done with the schools' budgets for just next year and through the formula funding is that the schools will be given exactly what they need through the formula. So it'll be then up to the schools themselves then, and with the actual governing body, and to make decisions as to how they're going to use that money. So potentially some of the schools may want to use some of their reserves and to assist them next year. But as far as we're concerned, we'll be giving the schools exactly what they need through the formula funding, and that will be assessing pupil numbers and all the other indicators then which are included within that formula.
Thank you, Steve. But if they're in budget deficit, they have no reserves to use up. They're in danger of needing extra funding. At what point does the council come in to if the governing body isn't managing them effectively?
I'll come in there, Councillor Chaplin. We do have a process where we do allow schools to have licence deficits for a number of years, which will actually support them. During that time, we will support them in actually looking at making redundancies and bringing their budgets back into the black, as it were. But if governing bodies are still not making the right decisions, we do have the power to actually take away that budgetary control from the governing body and actually manage it from a local authority perspective. We haven't had to do that yet. We do have a number of schools that have licence deficits and will be applying for deficits moving forward, but that is the ultimate role of the local authority to take that responsibility away from the governing body.
Okay, thank you very much, Sue, for that. That's my question.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Chaplin. Moving on now to Councillor Richards.
Thank you, Chair. My question is in relation to reference 21 in the appendix. I'm not sure what page number, but it's the children looked after residential placement services. I've got a couple of questions. The first one is for Lisa. If she could explain the projected placement figures for us, please.
Lisa?
Sorry, Councillor Richards. What number were you looking at on the report?
Reference 21.
It's page 19, Lisa. Of the report.
Sorry, okay.
It's the 12.25. What is meant by that, Lisa? That's what I'm not sure of.
I was going to say I'm not either. Okay, I think at the moment, so what you're looking at the figures there is we've got budget for 12 children in residential, but there is a little extra in the budget. So Stacey has done the calculation, 12.27, because that's the sort of, you obviously wouldn't have 0.2 of a child,
No.
but there is a little buffer in there. So we have one young person who has additional sort of services, but it sort of depends on his behaviour. So some of that extra support is stepped down at certain times during the year. So hence you've got that extra buffer in there. What the numbers in there then reflect are those children who then reach an 18, or there are step down plans for them.
Yeah.
So you'll see then that obviously in theory the numbers that are in residential should come down. That doesn't account for obviously if any new children enter into residential, and obviously that could happen tomorrow. So does that explain the
No, that does, Lisa. Yes, thank you very much. I got a follow up on that, if that's okay with you, Chair. It's in relation to the overspend, Lisa.
Yeah.
I've seen the summer, but I can't find it within these papers. Is that a 50% overspend on current budget for this year?
For children, for the residential budget?
Yes. Yeah. I'm only homing in on the residential issue.
Okay. There is an overspend on residential for this year, and I know we've asked for growth for next year. I think the overspend is probably, I don't think it's 50%, but I know it's a large amount, because I think it has come down because we've had a young person step down from residential successfully.
Yeah.
So that budget has come down slightly. I don't think it's quite 50%, but it is quite a high percent, sort of 30-40% over.
Right. Yeah.
Which is obviously being offset by underspending adult services.
Yeah. My final question in that area then is in relation to, is any work ongoing with neighbouring authorities to perhaps make provision amongst you to try and save costs in these even out of Wales placements?
Okay, so at the moment, Welsh Government have put the fund together. So we're looking at exploring regionally with Bridgend and with RCT, having a therapeutic residential unit within our area. So at the moment, the plan is that RCT would host. If the plans are being drawn up, I think the issue is going to be is where that home, if you like, is going to be, because nobody's probably going to want it on their patch. So we're going to have to be very sort of sensitive about how we manage that. But we will have access to one bed there, and it is planned to be a 4-bed unit. But obviously that's still sort of a plan. Nothing's been drawn up yet, and obviously that would need to go to Cabinet Council for approval.
Yeah.
Other local authorities that will do the same thing, because obviously each region would be offered similar capital funding. And in theory, you know, if we have lots of beds available, we could access, you know, in other areas as well, as long as we're willing to pay for them, and they would be nearer to us then.
Yeah. Because it's more or less the case at the moment that a lot of these providers have got a monopoly on the, I shouldn't say the market, but on the placements available.
They certainly have, yeah. And the difficulty is on a Friday afternoon, if you've got a very difficult 14, 15-year-old you need to place, and, you know, we've lost all our options, then sometimes the option is to go over the border and sometimes into England looking just for a placement.
And it is my final question then. Do you find that as a result of their position within the market that they then, shall we say, inflate, well, not inflate, but do you see regular on-year rises in placement costs for an individual child?
Not necessarily. I think when a child is settled in a placement, we are better at negotiating the contract now, so making sure that there's no increases in prices. Obviously, if the child's needs changes, then obviously the price goes up. And as they get older, sometimes the bracket changes. So if a child suddenly goes from primary school into secondary school, then the cost of education might be more if they're in residential. So, you know, lots of things can change, but we do contract manage much better.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, one of the councillors, while we've been going through questions, Councillor Jones has asked if officers can put up a paper copy. So I understand that Steve is going to do that. Sorry, not a paper copy, a copy on the screen. So I understand that Steve is going to do that now.
Yes, I should share the document now, Chair.
Lovely, thank you, Steve. And apologies to the committee. I always have paper copies myself. I'm quite old-fashioned in that way. So there we go. So hopefully that should help now. Okay, so moving on. Councillor Richards, was there any other questions?
No, thank you, Chair. No, thank you, Chair. That's fine, thanks.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, Councillor Gibbs, questions on Appendix 4, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the same as Councillor Jones. I haven't got paper copies. Some of us like to try and protect the environment instead of printing out all these papers. That's another matter. Anyway, my question is on page 25. And it's reference number 47, neighbourhood services. I think this one, it's regarding recycling collections. We've got reduced income from sale of recyclist processed at Unit 20. Can you provide a reason for the reduction in the income and what it actually relates to?
Yeah, it's in relation to the state of the market. Obviously, we have different materials that we move on, and income fluctuates throughout the year. But at the moment, certain materials are particularly difficult to move on, namely textiles and cardboard. So we are experiencing reduced income as a result of that.
Okay, thank you, Judith. And obviously, I appreciate that it's really early days yet, but is there any indication of an increase in those products?
Not at the moment. You know, we do speak to our advisors regularly on it, but those two materials in particular are problematic, and there isn't any signs of increases at the moment. No.
Okay. Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Chair. That's all for me.
Thank you, Councillor Gibbs. And I think there was more questions from. Bear with me a second, Councillor Chaplin.
Thank you, Chair. It's on the same page 25, item 46. At the middle paragraph, it says estimated expenditure for the treatment of recyclable waste. What do you mean by what is meant by the word treatment? Is that the sorting and the baling of the waste, or do we actually carry out a treatment to the waste?
No, it's the sorting and the baling.
Okay, so you mean processing? Should have been about, yeah, of the recyclable. My second question is, obviously we've got increased targets to meet of increasing our recyclables up to 70%. Normally, as you scale things up, costs increase. Are we likely to see any additional costs as we move, trying to bring the recycling rate up?
I think there always is potential for that. It's partly unknown at the moment. Obviously, new materials are coming on board all the time now in terms of technologies and things for what can be recycled. So, you know, different processes and different things can be recycled as we move through. But yeah, ultimately, there is potential for increased costs.
You know, because to be fair, a lot of our bins are getting old, and we stopped scaling out the stackable bins. Are there any moves to look at any alternative methods?
In terms of receptacles, you mean?
Yeah, because they're getting old and.
No, at the moment, you know, we do we can replace if ones are broken, but no, there's no intention to change the receptacles we've got. As you'll be aware, as part of the change to the blueprint in 2015, you know, that are the receptacles that we use now, and that you know, align to our collection vehicles.
Obviously, you mentioned things like cardboard and textiles are becoming practically worthless. Is it going to be a point that we're going to struggle to get rid of some of these items?
Hopefully not, and obviously, there are people in other areas, working specifically on that RAP, who are our Welsh Government advisors in particular, look at all various markets across the world, to remove waste too. So I would hope not.
Okay, thank you very much for your help, Judith. Much appreciated. That's my final question.
Okay. Okay, so I can Councillor Smith, and then we'll come to Councillor Thomas, Ian Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I got two questions now. Well, on page 17, number 15, it's the fostering service in-house. Is that the full cost of the service, or is additional cost to add on to it?
No, Councillor Smith, that's just the growth that's going in this, because obviously the budget is probably over £1 million.
So full cost to run a department, as you said, over £1 million, is it?
I think so. I haven't got the budget in front of me, otherwise I could tell you. But the 137 is basically growth, because we've got more in-house placements, which in some ways, I know it's more money, is a good news story, because we're using less independent foster agencies, and our recruitment campaign has worked. So we need growth in this budget, and it would obviously then we'll take money out of the IFA budget.
Okay, thank you. And on the other question, Chair, on page 21, number 32, community regeneration, community safety. Could somebody explain we're employing a new staff? What do his role entail? Because I have read it. He's going on and giving warning tickets out and penalty notices. So somebody explain.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Smith. This is specifically in relation to ASB. At the moment, well, you know that our only capacity with ASB is our senior community safety officer, and to actually be able to organise the rota, the joint visits with the police, actually look at the enforcement of ASBs which are actually breached. Then we need more capacity.
The only part of Alan is, do this guy work a shift work again, or he be day regular?
We haven't actually decided on the working pattern yet. We've only got as far as identifying the capacity of one who post.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. So going on to Councillor Ian Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. My question is for Steve, and it's on item 73. There's a very large additional spend there of £871,000 due to a change in government legislation regarding provision for the homeless. Can you tell me, please, what degree of certainty do you have of claiming this money back from the Welsh Government? Thank you.
It's the case that the hardship fund will be continuing into next year. We're currently in a discussion with the Welsh Government officials, and there could well be a mechanism as well by which we're able to claim, or we're able to book in advance as well for some of the spaces that we need, and just for this accommodation. So as early as a couple of hours ago, really, I was in discussions with some of the Welsh Government officials. And again, I think it's not just us. I think it's every authority has issues with just homelessness at this stage, and have been claiming down from the hardship fund in this year. As for the certainty, then I'm confident that we will have that money coming through next year, and it will be part of the hardship fund. It's obviously the case that we need to keep up the and just those just conversations with the Welsh Government officials over the next couple of weeks. But as things currently stand, I am confident that that will be will be funded next year.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so I think that's everybody for questions. Let me just double check. Oh, we've got Councillor David Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can we go to reference 41, please? Oh, yeah. With such a large increase in the cost of this service, was it ever discussed to bring this service back in-house? Originally, it was brought in as an efficiency, and this cost increase must bring it near to what the in-house service would cost. And with better control of the guards, I think that would be more advantageous to the council.
I'm not aware that there were discussions about bringing it in-house. The reason for the large increase is due to the previous contract being undervalued, and as you may be aware, there were significant issues with the previous contract in terms of both service provision and reliability of the providers. Then when this contract was renegotiated, all of the tenders received were significantly higher than the previous contract.
Do we have an idea of how much 3 guards would cost, or we didn't look at how much 3 guards would cost and bring it back in-house, did we?
I'm not aware that it was looked at bringing it in-house, no.
Because that would seem to me to be at this price, it would be very close, and as I said earlier, there would be more benefits to having the guards being directly employed. Just a question. Thank you for the answer.
Okay, is that all, Councillor Jones?
It is, thank you.
Okay, so I think we've got Councillor Smith and Councillor Clive Jones who both have another question. If we go to Councillor Smith first.
Chair, senior moment, forgot to knock it off.
Okay, Councillor Jones, did you have a final question?
I did indeed, Chair, thank you. It's on page 21, number 33, community regeneration in relation to the CCTV. We note there that because the decision was made last year that this would be a non-staffed provision, but that the 4 CCTV operator posts are still there, and it says in there, as a result of increased antisocial behaviour in the town centre and a risk of failing to meet our crime and disorder statutory duties if we proceeded with the reduction. So I agree that it would have been difficult if there was no staff there. Can I ask, in relation to the South Wales Police Force, the Police and Crime Commissioner, is there any indication, because my understanding that they use what comes up on the cameras there quite often, have they ever suggested a contribution from the South Wales Police Authority for this function?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Jones. Just to go to your observations, that is correct. We had the opportunity to make a substantial investment into the CCTV this financial year from external resources that we received from Welsh Government. I think it was in excess of £135,000. So we've now got a state-of-the-art facility which takes us into the 21st century. It's been an ongoing ask, not just from Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council, but our partners across CONTAF, about the police actually making a financial contribution. There's also been ongoing dialogue over the last couple of years about the police actually being able to either man or have some sort of central facility, none of which has come to fruition. But we keep asking those questions and making representation to the Police and Crime Commissioner about the direct financial input. But as at where we are today, there's no appetite to actually make any financial input.
Thank you. I'm sure, Alan, you'll keep still trying, because I think that they should be contributing to that, frankly. Chair, I've got another question, please, if it's all right. It's on page 29, number 70, Council Tax Reduction Scheme. It's based there on the assuming a 4.99% increase in council tax. And the figure being put in there for next year, 656,000. Am I right in saying that if the council tax increase was less than that figure of 4.99, that you wouldn't require that amount of 656,000 in the budget?
Yes, Clive, that's what we've calculated is that roughly for every 1% that we reduce the council tax by, we'll be losing council tax income of £307,000. But it would mean that there would be £70,000 less against the council tax reduction scheme. So for every 1% reduction in council tax, there's a net loss to the authority of £237,000.
Thank you.
Clive, you've finished?
I think so, Chair, yes, thank you.
Okay, so I think that we're finished on questions. So if there's no other questions, then could we move to comments on Appendix 4, please? Councillor Jones, you've got a comment?
I certainly have. And it's based on page 31 on there's 74 and 75. I know that it's difficult to estimate these figures because of the pandemic, and it does say there that these are COVID related and will be reimbursed by the Welsh Government. I presume they're not going to go on forever and ever reimbursing these COVID costs. But for example, the Orbit Centre is 100,000 and the figure for the parking is 275,000. Let's stick with the parking for the time being. There's a reduction in the season ticket income, and obviously with the college students back and forth there, currently not there at the moment, that has an effect. But I presume that hopefully as we start to come out of this pandemic, that there'll be a lot more people using the parking services, and so that figure will not be required, the amount that's been put in there for 275,000. And it's the same really for the Orbit Centre, Chair, that I know that you can't hire out these rooms at the moment, but hopefully at some time in the not too distant future, we won't be entirely stuck in our homes talking to a piece of plastic, that we'll at least be having meetings when we've all been vaccinated and it's safe. So those two figures, £100,000 to the Audit Centre and 275,000 for parking services, I would hope that things would start to get back to some normality later on in the year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. Is there any other comments before we move on? Okay, so if we move on now to appendix number 5, which I believe is on page 33 of the report. And Steve, is there anything you wanted to say to introduce appendix 5, or do you want to go straight into questions?
It's only really to say, Chair, that it is £705,000, which is investment that we require for next year, and those are on pages 33 to 35.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So if we go straight into questions. Okay, there doesn't appear to be any. So any comments on appendix 5? No. Okay, so moving on to appendix 6, which is page 37 of the report. And Steve, anything to say on this before we go to questions?
It's only again to say that it's £1.041 million, which has been identified as service efficiencies for next year. And these are mostly running costs, and they kind of they're just efficiency savings which our service managers have put forward, and it's just efficiencies that we believe that can be achieved next year.
Okay, thank you, Steve. So I think we've got a question from Councillor Carter. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, not so much a question, just a little observation. Bearing in mind what Councillor Jones said earlier about sharing the screen and things, and I think it's really, for me, it's great that it's there in front. But if we go into like Appendix 5 and Appendix 6, if people haven't got the notes in front of them and things, could we just change it slightly? Should we just asking questions and whatever's in front of us on the screen at the time? Otherwise, if we flicking straight through from one to another, people who haven't got the papers won't know what's on the screen, if that makes some sort of sense.
Okay, so there's obviously disparity between people who are using paper copies and people who aren't. So I think I'll discuss it with Democratic Services after the meeting, and we'll try and find a way that works better for everybody for the next time. Okay, so any other questions on page 36? We've got a question from Bob Williams.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Oh, okay. Can you hear me, Chair?
I can, but there's interference. Can everybody make sure that their microphones are off, please?
Is that okay?
That's slightly better. If you try now, Bob.
Okay, thanks. I said,
no, there's really bad interference. I don't know if anybody else can hear it, but it's very loud. Do you want to try once more? Try once more, Bob. If not, if you type the question, I can ask it for you if we have an issue.
Okay, it's a general question about all of Appendix 6, and it's whether or not some of them flag up issues that I think could be a higher risk than what they just state. So has risk assessments been carried out on all of these, or those in particular, like reduction to staff training budgets for learning and so on?
Okay, I'm guessing that's going to go to social services and learning, is it, Bob?
Yeah, it's whether risk assessments have been carried out or not.
Okay, so if we could maybe go to Sue first and then to Lisa.
None of all the options that we've actually put up for savings have been considered against what we currently deliver, and that we feel that these can be put up. There is no risk to anything else, to the service delivery as it stands. That's why we've been able to put those up. The issue with it, you picked up the training budget there. The ALN net will be in place as of September 2021. It's due in 22. So we've had the past 2 years of increased funding for that. As that rolls out and schools are more up to speed with it, we feel that we can actually release that 2,000 quite easily.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, did you, Bob, did you want something, did you want any confirmation from Lisa regarding risk assessments on the social services points on that page?
No, it's okay, thank you.
Okay, so if we move on, Bob, there was nothing else?
No, nothing else, thank you.
Councillor Jones, have you got one last comment?
It's a question, Chair.
We're actually on comments now, though, Clive.
On Appendix 6?
Yeah, we moved on to comments on Appendix 6
right.
now.
Oh, well, it's a comment then. It's in relation to the household waste recycling centres, closing both of them 1 day a week and reducing the hours to 5 p.m. in the summer. You know, I don't know, the last list we had of the survey from the department was 7 days in May 2019. Clearly, I'm not sure if consultation has been undertaken, but I'd be very interested to know what the public's view of shutting these at 5 o'clock in the evening. People who come in who are working during the week, particularly, or even for people who are working on a Saturday and Sunday. In the summer months, using either civic community site, will have to race home, get up there by 4:45 because they're advised to get there a quarter of an hour before they shut. And frankly, particularly the closure at 5 p.m, that is, in my view, rather early during the summer months, and certainly needs to be examined. If we're going to encourage people to take their recycling and other waste to the civic community centres, they need to be available and open. And if we're not very careful, it will mean that if people can't get there in the summer months by 5 o'clock, you'll find that this waste and fly tipping, etc., will be elsewhere rather than where it should be, and that's in the civic community centres. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so thank you, Councillor Jones. We've got comment from Councillor Ian Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Just a minor comment on item 30, fleet management. It talks about removing a fleet van with a saving overall of £2,000 per year. I just wondered, because that leaves the fleet engineer without a vehicle of his own, whether the saving of £2,000 was worth the logistical problems of ensuring that the fleet engineer has a vehicle. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Jones? David Jones?
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Clive Jones, I missed the questions, but regarding item 31, the HWRCs, I didn't think that I had an issue with a one-day closure on each site until I worked out the figures from the graph provided by the department, which was very informative, though I would have liked to have seen other months when the days are lighter and longer, such as June, July, August. The weekend not included, Aberfann's least used day is a Thursday, with 217 residents using the site. And Pendarren's least used day is a Friday, with 437 residents using the site. So if these days are chosen as the least used days, there will be 354 residents who will either have to change the day they use the chosen site or use the other site. And the vast majority of residents will do this. But what about the small number of residents that will not do it and end up dumping their waste? Even 5% would mean that there would be an increase of 32 extra fly tipping issues per week. What would the weekly cost be of that? Multiply that by 52 weeks, and I think it makes this £15,000 savings look small in comparison. Similarly, I've looked at the usage figures for both sites after 5 o'clock, and individually they appear to be small numbers. But when you add them up for the week, the figures are more concerning. Pendarren has 185 residents using the site between the hours of 5 and 8 o'clock in the evening. And Aberfan has 179 residents using that site, their site, over the same times weekly. This is a total of 364 residents using the facilities between 5 and 8 p.m. per week. Applying the same principle as above, this would mean a further 18 extra fly tipping issues per week. And what are the weekly and annual costs of cleaning that up? That is if my assumptions are close to the actual figures. And what of the reputation and environmental damage? Even if I hadn't looked at the collective figures, I would have had issues with the second proposal, as my instincts tell me that this is when residents who are working take their waste to the sites, and I agree with Councillor Jones on this, and there are 364 of them. That's the end of my comment for that one. Chair, can I move on to my other comment on 28? You see, we've got the page up there.
Yes, Councillor Jones. Is it going to be as long as that last one?
Not quite as long as that one.
Okay, go ahead.
28 is removal of the tractor. This vehicle has many uses as highlighted in the efficiency savings, including assisting the arborists. And when we have so many issues currently around trees either being damaged or felled by the recent weather, we have experienced it as proved to be invaluable to assist in tree removals, cleanups, etc. And whilst they're on the subject of weather-related issues, although we have not had heavy snow over recent winters, this type of vehicle again proved invaluable in accessing remote and difficult to reach areas to grit roads, which other vehicles would find it difficult, if not impossible, to access. Residents of Ulgerig and Pontstickell areas were delighted a few years ago when this vehicle kept their main roads open following heavy snowfalls, which had previously been among the last to open. For a relatively small saving, I believe this vehicle is worth keeping in service. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. So we've got comments from Councillor Jago and Councillor Salmon. If we could go to Councillor Jago first.
Thank you, Chair. My comment is on number 31 in relation to the Household Waste Recycling Centre, and I echo the concerns of Councillor Jones, really. I do feel that there is a risk in reducing the hours to 5 p.m. as a closure during the summer months, and particularly for those who are working, and particularly for my constituents in the very south of the county borough, which takes roughly about 15 minutes to get to the centre. And if you've got to consider the 15 minutes before closure, that means anybody needs to get there by leave Bedlin or go to Lewis by 4:30, really. For those who are working, I don't think that's achievable for everyone, and I think there's significant risks that need to be considered around that item.
Thank you, Councillor Jago. Anything else?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. Also in regard to number 31, I was just going to ask the officers, maybe this is before Councillor David Jones's comments, maybe they could split 1 and 2, the savings, so that residents could see the savings on each option, on closing the HWRCs 1 day per week, alternate days, and then see how much savings were there for the close during the summer months at 5 p.m. I think it just might be, when it goes to full council, it just might be easier for residents to, for councillors to make a decision. But then I got to agree with Councillor David Jones that even the point he made on closing the HWRCs 1 day a week could add to a lot of fly tipping as well. So I'm just wondering if
Chair, you could pass it on. Maybe the officers could break down 1 and 2.
Okay, so there's a lot of councillors, and I've also had some comments in the chat from other members of the committee voicing the same concerns. I think that this does need to be looked at further. I take on board Councillor Salmon's suggestion, and obviously we do need to feed that back, and I wonder whether this needs to be looked at further as well, just to pick up on the concerns of the committee. I don't know who the best person is for that. Is that you, Alan?
That'd be Judith. We'll discuss it tomorrow, Chair.
Okay, lovely, thank you. If there is any feedback or anything that's changing on that, I'm guessing it'll come up in the future meetings. Alan?
Yeah, that's fine. That'll come through. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. So Councillor Salmon and Councillor Jago have still got their hands up. Have they got any final comments?
Sorry, Chair, mine was legacy.
Okay.
Me too.
Okay, so I think, is that everything on Appendix 6? Yeah, okay. So I think that's all the appendices done. So as long as, are there any other general comments on the report as a whole? If not, we'll move on. Okay. So moving on, agenda item number 4, any other business deemed urgent by the chair? I don't have any, apart from following up with the concerns that have been raised this evening. Other than that, I don't have anything else. So with that, I will thank you all for your time this evening and end the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.